Welcome to Political Perspectives. I'm Hugo Gurdon, Editor-in-Chief of the Washington Examiner. If you're joining us on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. I'm joined today by Salena Zito, columnist for the Washington Examiner. And Salena, I want to talk to you about the interview that you've just done with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth at the War College. First of all, he's the #1 target of the Trump resistance at the moment. Does he show signs of strain because of that? How's he bearing up?
Well, I saw him in a setting that is outside of DC. It's outside of Crystal City, right? And I think that's where a lot of the pressure that he feels is happening. So I saw him at the Army War College. That's in rural Pennsylvania, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, one of the oldest outposts in the entire country. In fact, it was an outpost before we were even a country. And he's very relaxed, very confident. And it showed in the speech that he gave to over 1,000 servicemen and women. These are people that are military leaders, officers who are at the peak or heading towards the peak of their careers in the military. And there was a confidence there that I suspect he might not always embody when he is in DC.
Right. President Trump held a cabinet meeting at the White House on Wednesday, and Pete Hegseth was sitting to his left, and he immediately went to Pete Hegseth, describing him in a kind of jokey way as the least controversial member of the cabinet. Trump was also interviewed on ABC just in the last 24 hours, and he was asked about the controversy surrounding Pete Hegseth, particularly the controversial chats that he had used on Signal relating to Yemen and military operations. Trump said that Hegseth could be a good or even a great Secretary of Defense. He was asked whether he backed him 100%, and he sort of dismissed the question by saying that he backs nobody or nothing 100%.
And I think he's going to be a very good defense, hopefully a great defense secretary, but he'll be a very good defense secretary.
You have 100% confidence in
I don't
Pete
have 100% confidence in anything, okay? Anything. Do I have 100%? It's a stupid question. Look.
It's a pretty important position.
No. You don't have 100%. Only a liar would say I have 100% confidence.
So a question mark still hangs over Pete Hegseth. Do you think that he should feel confident or perhaps a little concerned?
I think he should feel confident. I suspect that that's an answer President Trump would give about anyone, and maybe even being reflective about himself. He might not always 100% back everything that he's done before or has said before. That's sort of a mark of his personality and his willingness to be nimble around situations.
So good. Let's get to the substance of the interview that you did with the Defense Secretary. One of the things he told you in the interview that you've done for the Washington Examiner magazine was that he found himself thinking similarly in some ways about the Pentagon as Donald Rumsfeld did when he was the Defense Secretary for President George W. Bush. What is that about?
So a lot of people associate Rumsfeld as being the Secretary of Defense during two major wars, Iraq and Afghanistan. However, he didn't go into that job doing that. In fact, people may completely forget that on September 10th, 2001, the day before we were attacked, he gave a sort of fire and brimstone speech at the Pentagon, saying emphatically, there was no equivocation here. He said, our greatest enemy is not the former Soviet Union. It's not Russia. It's not a despot dictator in the Middle East. It's within this own building. It is within the bureaucracy of the Pentagon, and I am here to reform it. And so Hegseth really admires that approach. Right. And so, Rumsfeld, who I gave an exit interview with when he left the Pentagon, and he said that was his deepest regret, that he was never able to do what he really wanted to do, which was cull the fat, the bureaucracy, and have a more streamlined, more technological, advanced military, a lean fighting machine. And so I think that Hegseth is onto something. People may think of Rumsfeld as one thing, but he was also went into that job as a reformer. It's why Bush picked him.
Right.
And so I think Hegseth sees himself in that role.
Well, so describe, Salena, a little bit about the challenge that Hegseth therefore faces. It's a long time now, more than 20 years since Rumsfeld entered the Pentagon and hoped to be a reforming Secretary of Defense. But so 20 more years of perhaps inertia and stagnation, or whatever it may be. Describe some of the scale of the challenge, because of course the Pentagon, or at least the Defense Department, put it that way, is one of the biggest employers in the world.
It is the biggest employer in the world. It employs over 3.7 million people. That's not even including the nearly 1 million contractors. The Pentagon itself is the size of a mid-sized city in the middle of the country. 27,000 people work there. And they like the way it's going. In other words, they don't want the bull in the china shop to mess up their china shop. And that was what Rumsfeld was going to do. They did not like him when he went in there, and Hegseth faces the same challenge. But I think he's like leaning into this. He's not backing away from it. He understands that what he wants to do is not what the organism that is the Department of Defense wants to easily hand to him. And it's not just pushback from bureaucracy within the Pentagon. It's also the press, the legacy press that's pushing back. It's also Democrats. It's also some Republicans.
Right.
So he's encircled. He's encircled by irritating a lot of people. And when you do that, even the slightest thing you get wrong is magnified and blown. I don't know if out of proportion is the correct term to use, but certainly blows up on you. And because the legacy media does not understand sort of the mission statement of the administration to make the military more lean, they're going to continue to hammer him.
There's that old idea that, I mean, that something starts as a movement, becomes a business, and ends up as a racket. There's something similar in government agencies, which start out with, as it were, a mission. And obviously the Defense Department has a mission, which is to deter or win wars, depending on which one is possible and which one is necessary. It has then become an enormous business. Defense contractors are making hundreds of billions of dollars. I think that the Pentagon budget is somewhere in the region of $900 billion annually. But it then becomes a vested interest, and there's a lot of resistance to change. People who are on the inside of something which is spending $900 billion a year have a pretty strong and substantial interest in not seeing that change, not least the lobbyists for contractors. And that brings me to another question, which is about procurement. One of the aspects of what Hegseth was talking about was, as you said, making the military, let's say, leaner, certainly more responsive to the needs of the next war rather than procurement for the last war. And that's the procurement. We're now in an epoch when multi-billion-dollar weapon systems, such as aircraft carriers, can be destroyed by drones, which cost in the thousands of dollars or the tens of thousands of dollars rather than in the millions or billions. So that is the challenge that he faces. And tell us a little bit more about what he said about the need for the right procurement and the readiness for the next war.
Well, to your point, technology has changed dramatically, even since we exited from Afghanistan and Iraq to Ukraine. And that's why I was really curious to ask him, what have you learned from Ukraine, right? What is happening there? What are you learning about what our military should look like? And that has a lot to do with technologies and what we now use in terms of defense and military wise. Do we use big Humvees anymore? Do we use drones? Right? These are all kinds of things that he is analyzing and trying to understand when it comes to the next great threat, which also is, by the way, cyber.
Right.
And AI. I mean, the president has put a mandate, and I interviewed Secretary Bergman about this. The mandate is we're not in the AI race. We're going to win it. That is his mandate. And that all ties in as well to the Department of Defense.
Right, right. So, final question, Salena. You heard him giving a speech. You've talked about the fact that what he's trying to do is to reform and, to some extent, perhaps revolutionize what the Department of Defense does, revolutionize it to the extent of going back to its basic mission, as I defined it, of either winning wars or deterring wars. So how did his speech on these subjects go over with the people who were listening to him? You say there was about 1,000 people there, and you can tell us a little bit about the kind of people who were there. But, you would think that there being that vested interest, there would be a lot of opposition to what he's doing. There's certainly, as you've said, a lot of opposition in Washington, at the Pentagon, in the press, etc. Who was there, and how did what Hegseth was talking about go over with them?
So you're looking at senior military officers, people that are lieutenant colonels and above within our own military. There's also intelligence officers there, FBI, CIA, Secret Service. And there's also the equivalent to those positions from 77 different countries across the world who are all attending to be the best of the best in our military at the Army War College. It's a 10-month semester that they spend with intensive cyber training, military training, intelligence training. Originally they were thought maybe a few hundred, then it grew. They started adding chairs for 800. That spilled over to an extra 200 or so attending it. So it was robustly attended. I would say almost the entire War College was there.
Right.
And their reaction was incredibly positive. You could see people, I mean, I'm watching it from behind. Secretary of Defense Hegseth is standing on a podium that's in front of a gazebo, like a bandstand, and I'm sort of standing behind it, watching everyone. I sort of wanted to see how people reacted, and you saw a lot of heads going back and forth, people looking at each other, shaking their head, applause. It was very well received.
So he wants a military which has a warrior ethos and not a bureaucratic ethos, and you got the impression that those very senior officers and senior people in the intelligence services approve of that.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Salena, thanks very much indeed. A really interesting interview, and I recommend it to all our viewers to look at it in the magazine. Thanks very much for joining us on Political Perspectives. Again, like and subscribe if you're looking at this on the YouTube channel, and we'll see you again next week.